We're going to spend the next few minutes talking about child abuse. And I wish we didn't have to. But abuse in its many forms is one of the most serious problems facing our society today. A recent study showed that almost 1 out of every 3 adults in Canada has been impacted by abuse. Abused children are made to suffer at the hands of those that they should be able to trust the most. And all too often, the damage lasts a lifetime. Studies show that kids who've been abused are far more likely than others to end up using drugs, being sexually exploited, attempting suicide, living on the streets, or becoming abusers themselves. So what's the definition of abuse? A non-accidental injury of mistreatment by the actions or the omissions of the child's parents or guardians or even other adult influences. Child abuse occurs with alarming frequency and in many different forms. It might be physical abuse, which is any intentional physical force or action that can result in injury to a child. It could also be sexual abuse, and that's the use of a child for sexual gratification. This includes sexual touching as well as non-touching abuse, such as making a child watch sexual acts or take sexual pictures of themselves or videos. It might even be the adult intentionally peeping in on a child while they're changing or in the shower. There's also emotional abuse, and that's a pattern of destructive behavior or verbal attacks by an adult. It can include rejecting or terrorizing the child. It can be ignoring, isolating, or exploiting, or even corrupting a child. Finally, there's neglect, and what this is a failure to provide for the child's basic needs like food and clothing, adequate shelter, supervision, even medical care. What you need to know is that reporting abuse isn't an option. It's actually your legal duty. If you think that a child is being abused, you must report your suspicion or your knowledge to your supervisor so that they can walk through the appropriate steps. They'll let the agency that's responsible for protecting young people know. And you know what? You don't need to have an ironclad case against the abuser. You don't even need to know the details. The responsibility to prove allegations rests with the government ministry and with the police. Your job is just to reflect how God sees them as precious, valuable, and worth protecting. So, as a volunteer, how do you know when someone's being abused? Well, you may notice some signs of abuse or neglect in them. Some warning signs like unexplained bruises, especially on their face or their lower back or their thighs or their arms. You might notice that the bruises are even different colors that indicate that they've happened at different stages. The child or the youth might also have sexual knowledge that's just not usual for their age, or they might have language or behavior that's sexualized beyond their peers. They might lack proper hygiene or maybe proper clothing for the weather conditions. They might have kind of an inappropriate responsibility for the well-being of younger siblings. They might have comments they're making about not having eaten for a while or being locked out for days. You might find them becoming anxious or fearful after they've been outgoing and friendly for most of the time you've known them. They may have constant complaints such as stomach aches that have no medical basis. There might just be a fear of going home. Just remember that these are warning signs and they don't necessarily mean abuse is happening, but especially where one or more sign is present in a young person over time, there is a cause for concern. Second way you might know if a child is being abused is that one of their friends might hint about it. Remember, if you have heard something, you need to ask the teen about it. Ask them directly. You could even talk with their friends about doing this together so that they can express their concern and support. Abused and neglected children almost always show signs of their suffering. But with teens who've been in abusive relationships over time, the abuse has almost become a norm in their life. It's something they've learned to live with. And so we need to realize that just because they're coping doesn't make it any less wrong. We need to communicate the value that young people have in our eyes and in the eyes of God by showing them that abuse in any form is not okay. There's a third way you might find out about abuse, and that is by the young person just telling you. Often this starts out with a question. Hey, can you keep a secret? The answer to that is, I don't keep secrets that might allow my friends to be harmed, because I care too much about them to let that happen. If they do choose to tell you about abuse, here are a few things to keep in mind. Number one, stay calm. If this has been happening for a while, you don't need to rush out and make something happen for them in the next 5 minutes. First, you need to listen. You need to stay calm, you need to listen. Use your eyes, use your ears, use your posture to show them that you're entirely there for them. Secondly, let them know that you believe them. And let them know that you think they're strong because they're talking about this. Thirdly, tell them you're so sorry this has happened, that this is part of their story, but let them know this is not their fault and this doesn't define them. Fourthly, don't say that everything will be fine now, because it may take a lot of time before everything is ever fine again. After you've listened to their story, you do need to contact your supervisor and you need to tell them what you've heard. You need to tell the young person that you will be doing that and involve them in that process as much as possible. Often a young person will be very concerned after they have heard that you'll tell the supervisor and the supervisor will report this to the authorities. They're going to think their family's going to get blown apart. Everything is going to be just a mess. You need to let them know that the ministry responsible for the safety of children and youth, that their mandate is actually to keep families together. And that by letting them know about this, the family is actually going to get support. They're going to get services that might help health come back to this family unit. Let them know that children and youth are only removed from homes if there's immediate danger. Put their mind at ease. If you suspect abuse is taking place and the young person is unwilling to talk about it, one thing you can do is you can connect them to the kids' help phone at the number below. They can even stay anonymous, and a trained counselor will listen and walk them through the situation. Don't let your own fear of not knowing what to say or your uncertainty about what will happen next hold you back from standing for kids who might not think that they're valuable to stand up for themselves.